Thanks, everybody. My slide, this opening slide, looks a little weird. That head in the clouds is supposed to be down a bit, so if the format in the rolling forward is weird, it's kind of not my fault. I don't know what happened. All right. Alexa, tell me a joke. Live demo. Oh, I'm using my phone as a hotspot. I wasn't sure if it was going to work. All right. So head in the clouds.
Teacher's favorite cereal. The Grape Nuts of Wrath.
Grape Nuts of Wrath. There you go. All right. So my name's Chris. I am a software developer. And I was born and raised in Erie. I lived here until I graduated from high school, at which point I moved to Philadelphia. I now live in Seattle. I am a corgi enthusiast. In before the internet got obsessed with them. I've been obsessed with them forever. I also am an industrial sewing hobbyist. I have an industrial sewing machine that I use to stitch together way too many layers of fabric to make backpacks and stuff. I also launched a failed Kickstarter campaign to do a knitting bag. My sewing skills and my wife is into knitting. We combined those things and made a failure, so it was great. And lastly, I am not speaking on behalf of Amazon right now, although I work for them. This is just me as a hobbyist. I just put that in there to keep everybody happy. That's my sewing machine. That thing I trash picked. It's from the 40s. It is pure cast iron, and when I dropped it on the concrete one time, it broke the concrete. And when I turned it on in my old apartment in Philadelphia, it would dim the lights for a little while. So, yeah. And that's what I made with them. So, lastly, this is my dog, Becca. She's a corgi. She's cute, and she's very good. Okay, so what's Alexa? So I imagine many of you know, but for those of you that might not, it is Amazon's cloud-based voice service. It's available on devices that Amazon manufactures, but it's also available for other device manufacturers. Other companies can put Alexa on their devices. Ooh, forgot to mute her. So, sorry about that. Okay. She's designed for natural voice experiences, and it's meant to be like a more intuitive way of interacting with technology. I think many people have become acclimated to the keyboard and mouse at this point. It's become kind of standard. But the voice is meant to be even more natural and less friction and more disappearing into the background. And so one of the things that you can do with Alexa is create Alexa skills. Skills are kind of like apps for Alexa. It gives you the ability to create custom, unique experiences and give your Alexa device capabilities that it might not otherwise have. For instance, one of the skills that's available is you can order an Uber. That's something that is not from us. It's not from Amazon. It's from Uber. They did that. Yeah, so you can basically take anything that's connected to the internet, create a skill for it, and now you can use Alexa to interact with that thing and get responses back and get data back. So here's sort of a diagram of like what that looks like. It's very simple, and I just kind of did it myself. There's much more complex technology behind this, not just a cloud. But effectively what happens is when you speak to your Echo or whatever other Alexa-enabled device you have, that request gets sent up to Alexa, the Amazon service, and then it will redirect over to your endpoint, which is the thing that you made for your skill. So that could be your server. It could be anything that adheres to the particular requirements of creating an endpoint for Alexa. But it can be an AWS Lambda. It can be your own EC2 instance. It can be a server you run. And then that way you can access and interact with your data and then return stuff back to the device that someone is interacting with. So here's an example. Alexa's my web server down, and it says, no, your web server is not currently down. What this would look like is that I'm asking Alexa if the web server's down, and then it's going and doing a ping and checking and going to my endpoint, which then verifies whether or not it's up or down, and then tells me. So why would you build one of these? So one of the things about voice interaction with technology is that it feels natural. You know, speech exists. It has existed before screens. It existed before the keyboard. It even existed before the written word. Like, speech is sort of one of the earliest ways that human beings have communicated, and it gives us this sort of natural ability. I mean, I know that we all have or I'm sure many people have thought about the idea of like this technology receding into the background and it becoming better at anticipating our needs. And this is one way of reducing the barrier of interaction with technology. Also, unlike my dog, voice interaction is less intimidating to many people. So, as I said before, I'm sure many of us are familiar with and comfortable with things like mice and keyboards. But I think a lot of times people think technology can be kind of like this, just kind of like this maze. Maybe I don't know where to begin. I mean, if the existence of a site like Let Me Google That For You is sort of proof to me, or at least evidence to me, that people are just intimidated by technology. They just don't even know where to begin. And so something like voice, like, Alexa, help, how do this thing, is the sort of thing that kind of reduces that friction and helps people do stuff. Why else build Alexa skills? Well, hands-free is really convenient. I can't tell you the number of times that I have had my hands deep in some sort of cooking project or something, and you can do everything from changing the song that you're listening to making a call, to adding something to your shopping list, to even ordering it. And you don't even have to stop what you're doing. So hands-free is very convenient. Another thing that's nice about building an Alexa skill is the reach. There are millions of device owners out there with millions of devices. And you really have a wide audience in an exciting industry, an exciting segment of technology devices, and so there's a lot of people to interact with. And the last reason is that it's the freaking Alexa. Alexa's the freaking Star Trek computer. I mean, like, it's the Star Trek computer. It's like that's what the dream is, and it's like the idea that you could just say, "Computer, do X," and it just does it. And it's like that's what we're going for. That's what I think. That's where technology is heading, and I think that it's one of the coolest parts of working on something like a hands-free device. So, if you want to build a skill, say you want to allow your clients to ask Alexa where your product is instead of them asking you for a status update, you've got a couple of options. The first option is Alexa skill blueprints. And blueprints are very easy, very fast, and have some limitations. And then the other thing, to get the full feature, the full power, is the Alexa Skills Kit. And the Alexa Skills Kit is something that's got more capabilities, but it comes with it more complexity. So I'm going to start with the blueprints. So blueprints give you the ability to create personalized experience with absolutely no coding required. Effectively, if you want to create an interaction on your device that is registered to your account, you can do that by basically filling out a form on blueprints.amazon.com. Now, if you want these capabilities to be something that someone could download that doesn't know you, or somebody that maybe they want to put it on their own device, that is not what Blueprints is for. Blueprints is more for something like maybe your kids want to create a funny game or something like that, or maybe you have an Airbnb and you just want to set out, like, you can ask me the Wi-Fi password, that sort of thing. Blueprints are really good for that. Here's some examples of what Blueprints can offer. These are all available right now. You could do things like flashcards. You could do custom Q&A stuff. I'm not planning my bachelorette party anytime soon since I'm married, but you could do that. Yeah, stuff like that. So it just gives you all these sort of interaction abilities, and it's just you click on one on the website, you answer a few questions, and then all of a sudden it rolls it out to your Alexa-enabled device, and now you can interact with them. So this is my dog asking who the best doggo is, and it's her. Staging that photo was surprisingly easy because she literally just didn't move. She's just like, whatever you're doing, just do it. I hate this. Oh, I use that picture every time I have a sick day at work. I send that in. So blueprints.amazon.com. This, you can create a skill, no joke, less than 5 minutes. All right, so here's the other one. This is Alexa Skills Kit. Now, this is where things get powerful, they get more versatile, and it's where they get a little more complicated. If you want to interact with external systems, if you want to create fully featured, rich, detailed, complex interactions, that is the sort of thing. Or if you want to release it on the public Alexa App Store, that is, or the Skill Store, that is where that's where you would use the Alexa Skills Kit. And that's at developer.amazon.com. Now I'm going to dive in a little bit deeper into what the Skills Kit offers and what the steps are in general to get this done. But yeah, that's at developer.amazon.com, so you can set up an account and do that. So here's the process. Let's walk through it. I'm going to give a very, very brief, very vague overview, but the documentation is very good. And so if you are interested, you can very quickly get ramped up using the docs. So the prereqs for doing this. You have to have some coding skills. I say intermediate because there's some interactions that I think benefit from having the greater understanding of sort of an intermediate level of coding skills, but certainly I think that it's achievable for anyone that wants to. And then you just need accounts in AWS and regular old Amazon, and then you could do it in about 45 minutes, probably less if you really know what you're doing, or if you get pretty quick at it. So step one, planning the skill. So this is where you sit down and you don't even have your computer out, you're just with a sheet of paper and you're just thinking about it. So what do you want to name it? What's the display? This is mostly about just tracking it in the development lifecycle. After that, you select a model. Now a model can be off the shelf from Amazon, or you can create a custom model. Effectively, a model is a pairing between one or more phrases that trigger an action and an action. So the phrases are what we call utterances, and that's what you are uttering to your Alexa-enabled device. And then the intent is what is the action that occurs as a result of those utterances. And when you put those together, that makes a model. And lastly, you can have an invocation name. That's another thing in the process that what it does is you say how you're actually invoking this skill. So it'd be like, Alexa, launch Chris's amazing Becca app or skill. After that, you create your intents. So the model is the pairing of the intents, and you have to actually create them. When I was going through these documents to make this skill, I did a get Erie fact intent. So I created a simple skill that says, Alexa, tell me a fact about Erie, and then she rattles off one of the chunk of what's in Wikipedia. And then from there, you can say what sorts of utterances can trigger this intent. So if I say retrieve if I say retrieve a fact, that's when I want you to grab one. After that, you're creating an endpoint. So the endpoint is really the point at which, after the Alexa-enabled device communicates with the cloud, after that, you have the endpoint, which is really your portion of it. And that's where you're doing something like, update this database, or retrieve this data from your account, or any of that sort of thing. So the endpoint's the part that you control that does the compute that is not sort of Amazon generic. After that, you want to, so I put Lambda in there because when I did mine, it was a Lambda. So if you're creating an endpoint, I said earlier that you can do any sort of server that meets sort of a small list of requirements for being an endpoint and communicating with the Amazon's Alexa service. The one that I find easy, because it's AWS and is tight integration, is Lambda. You can use a Lambda using any of the languages that Lambda supports to just trigger to run an endpoint and then retrieve data. So if you have a Lambda or whatever, what you're doing is you effectively then connect the skill which you've created to that endpoint. So when you're building this skill, you say, okay, when this skill gets invoked and when I trigger this intent, hit this endpoint, and then on that endpoint do the compute and retrieve the data and return it and do all that stuff. After that, test. And you can actually test. So the Alexa developers portal gives you the ability to run tests as though it were an end user, or as though you were an end user, without actually even owning an Alexa-enabled device. You can actually use the simulator where you can use your voice or text, and it will actually do the response. Or you can do manual JSON if you just want to send the blob, or if you want to examine the blobs that are going forward and backwards. You could do any of that stuff. So it's really flexible in how you do this sort of testing to sort of make sure that your skill experience is good and that your users will be happy. And then this last part here, there's of course a lot more to this. There's Alexa or Amazon recently announced the ability to now do purchases, so you can actually like do in-app purchases in skills, where you can sell things or have subscriptions or anything. I don't know if it's subscriptions. I know you can like buy things through the skill. Another thing you can do is slots. So I created a skill that is get a fact about Erie, but I may want to expand that and scale up to every city in the world. And so now I have a slot called city, and I define it as a city. And what this does is you create the slots in the utterances that you accept, and then you can order them and say what type of thing they're supposed to be. So for instance, if I said, Alexa, can you tell me a fact about banana? It would be like, is that a city? I'm not sure, because you've already indicated that what it should be is from a list of cities or something similar. And then you can actually have the slot fed back when you get a response. Okay, so this is kind of fast, but this is basically it for me. Here's some resources. The two that I mentioned today were blueprints.amazon.com. That's where if you want to just get your toes wet and see what you feel about like voice interaction and things like that. There's also developer.amazon.com. That's where you're going to get sort of the more rich Alexa Skills Kit experience, and it's also where you're going to be able to see a lot of the documentation related to this development. And you can find me on Twitter at Christopher Nies. And then I will be around and at the after party. If anybody wants to chat, I am happy to do so. Thank you.